It's so wonderful to be here. By way of quick introduction, my name is Yasmeen Ahmad. I lead strategy and outbound product management at Google Cloud for data and analytics. So we cover all of the technologies from our data technologies through Gen AI, machine learning to streaming and governance and all the way through to business intelligence. So a really broad set of technologies in that portfolio, including both Google technologies that we've innovated in-house, but also critically open source technologies plus partner technologies that bring together that entire data to analytics end-to-end capability that customers are looking for. So it's a pleasure to be here today because it's so good to engage with the community here around Beam and all of the amazing work that has been happening over the past year. Shan is somewhere in the room. Shan and I are working every week on all of the innovations that also Google is doing around the entire Beam ecosystem. And we're very proud of the work that we do with this community, because for us, our role is serving some of the world's largest companies. It was great to see those logos up there. Many of those are Google customers. And those customers come to Google because they want to see the innovation. They want to tap into the types of innovation that Google is delivering every day. And typically, our engineers are looking across the ecosystem at what's the best technologies that Google can bring in. How can we support the ecosystems out there? And how do we harden those technologies so that we can have them operate at scale, at efficiency for some of those largest use cases in the world? So very excited by all of the innovation happening. And in today's talk, as I was thinking about everything that's happening in this space, I couldn't not have a title that didn't have Gen AI in it, real time in the age of Gen AI. It feels like no conversation these days can start without Gen AI, have Gen AI in the middle somewhere and at the end. Gen AI is definitely a driving force. And we actually see it as a big driving force. If I just take my experience having spoken with customers last year, and particularly last year, we're coming out of COVID. There had been a ton of digitalization during COVID, which was super exciting. But then we hit last year and we suddenly saw organizations kind of pull back. It was, if you remember, beginning of 2023, there was a lot of concern. Are we going to hit recession? What's happening with kind of the economy and the world? So a lot of budgets being pulled back, a lot of data projects and initiatives being pulled back. And so we saw this kind of lull. But as soon as Gen AI hit early last year, and as that momentum built across last year, we suddenly saw organizations again really lean into what is the opportunity of transformation. And when I think about Gen AI, I think about it as actually a trigger point. It's not necessarily that Gen AI is all new technology. Yes, we have large language models, but actually much of that technology existed. There'd been decades of research into neural networks and decades of work into actually advancing the capabilities. But what happened with Gen AI was that trigger point was suddenly a number of technologies coming to a level of maturity where if you can now combine those technologies, now you can get transformation. Digitalization, real time, AI, machine learning, data architectures, the cloud, a number of different pieces coming together that truly enable transformation. And you see this in every industry. It's not just this moment today. If you look at some of the biggest innovations that have happened in history, mobile phones, the internet, so on, true innovation or transformation happens normally at the intersection of a number of different technologies. It's not one technology it's the thing. It's like with mobile phones. Phones existed before. In fact, the screen technology had been developed, the touch technology had been developed, but suddenly came the iPhone. It brought together a number of different technologies. And so at Google, as we look at this era of Gen AI, as we call it, it means more than just Gen AI to us. It means a number of these technologies coming together and really making data, which we say we analyzed and got lots of insights from, but really we weren't even analyzing, we were analyzing 10% of a company's data. Suddenly, with a number of these technologies coming together, we can be analyzing so much more of a company's data, extracting so much more insight from that data, driving real-time action, actually building what we call also the autonomous enterprise. So what I'd love to talk to you today about is how we see some of those GenAI trigger points playing out, and how we see data real time and batch playing into a lot of those use cases. Now, I love this quote from Arthur. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. It kind of captures the moment that we're living in right now. We're really being wowed by what technology can do. Enterprises are being wowed by the impact that data can have, that insights can have. And again, it's that intersection of technology coming together. So GenAI very much captured the world's imagination last year, and it's not died down in 2024. We continue to see just massive momentum in this space. However, as we start to see and tap into those GenAI use cases, actually, it all comes back to the data. My boss, Garrett, he often says, GenAI just shone a light on the data platform, on the data, and how are we getting the data? Do we have access to the data? How is it streaming in? How are we working with the data? I typically do 2-3 customer exec briefings a week. And in every single briefing, the conversation might start with GenAI, but like literally within the first minute, they will be talking about the data. Boards, C-suite level execs, all talking about data, because without the foundation of data, actually, you can't tap into that magic of GenAI. So a lot of the focus has come down to data. And it's not just structured data like we've traditionally worked with. It's all types of data. It's PDFs, it's images, it's videos, it's sensor. It's all data that is generated, collected, managed by a company. And it's data in real time. Great having all of the batch processes, ETL processes to get data in, but today we're seeing batch and real time come together more closely than ever before. And I'll talk a bit more about how those patterns are playing out. But core to Google meeting customers where they are is our support of Beam and working within our ecosystem. I'll talk a lot about data flow. Essentially, data flow is our offering around Beam. Really making sure that as organizations leverage Beam, they're able to leverage it at enterprise scale. So when they start to not just stream the structured data and all types of data, how can they use Beam with multimodal data? How can they use Beam with Google's Gemini models and Google's AI innovations? How can they use Beam at scale with petabytes of data being coming in every single day? How can they do that at a price performance that makes sense? And we're super excited by also all of the recognition that we're seeing in the industry, whether it's Gartner or Forrester. Even just having the Gartners and Forresters leaning in and talking about our technology at that scale for enterprises shows just the importance of the technology in today's landscape. So let me talk about 4 different learnings as we've been operating across the past year in this GenAI era, and how we're seeing data really play a critical role, and some of the use cases that we are seeing from customers. So the first trend I want to start with, and I'm going to go back to large language models, is data is king. So Google, we are innovating some of the largest large language models out there. You've all probably heard about Gemini. Massive models, massively trained models to serve many of those GenAI use cases that we see today. However, as our teams, whether it's the DeepMind, I saw DeepMind on the logo slide, so maybe somebody from DeepMind in the room. As our teams from DeepMind and our research teams work on large language models, they've been experimenting. There's been the question of like, is a bigger model better than a smaller model? They've been testing with different data sets. And actually, some interesting learnings come out as our teams do that research. So, bigger is not necessarily better. You might have seen that in the press. As we test with large language models, what we're learning is sizes and everything. So the parameter size of these models has increased as we've scaled them to go bigger and bigger and bigger. But actually, there's a point of plateau or diminishing return. Like, yes, the model continues to improve, but it's a diminishing return. You don't see that massive improvement you would taking a small model and starting to scale. So what makes the difference? What makes the difference is the data. It's all about the quality of the data. These large language models are learning human behaviors. They're learning about the world. They're learning about how different industries operate. They're learning about different processes. And all of that learning comes from data. So ultimately, it's the size and quality and accuracy and usefulness of that data that matters to a model. So taking a model of a smaller size and training it with better quality data can get you better outcomes than actually the largest of large models. So data is king. Data is very important. Now, however, I would also say, actually, it's not necessarily that we're throwing out the large models. There's a reason why we're innovating on Gemini. There's a reason why the models are growing larger, because there's a different dimension of large language models that starts to come out when you look at models at that really large scale. It's only at that really large scale that you start to see models have emergent capabilities. Emergent capabilities are capabilities we didn't train the model to have. These are capabilities that a model gets when it's able to get to a certain size and scale and understand the world and context. This is capabilities like reasoning and understanding and decisioning. So actually, in the Google ecosystem, you today have access to 130 different large language models of different sizes, shapes, and scales, because there's some really highly trained models with specific data, but then there's also the large models that are enabling and unlocking new capabilities. But it all comes back to data. How are we training the models? Because even the largest of large models need to be trained on high quality data. And this is where we come back to those data pipelines. So I don't actually expect organizations to train their own models. I think in the early days, organizations were testing and trying. But largely today, we see organizations using the large language models that exist. However, what you do see organizations doing today is tuning those models, because it's like taking an off-the-shelf generic model from the shelf and applying that to your business. It works 80, 90%, but it's so much more powerful if you can tune it. So big shift we're seeing is actually organizations moving to different types of tuning techniques. Fine tuning or RAG, retrieval augmented generation, two techniques that are becoming very popular. Now, fine tuning is taking all of your batch data and essentially training the model to understand the nuances of your business, understand the language of your business, the context of your business. Whereas on the other hand, RAG, retrieval augmented generation, is all about giving real-time access to data. So if I ask the model a question right now, it will give me the real-time, up-to-date answer of what are my sales, how is customer experience trending, how is revenue looking. It can give me real-time answers because it's connected to real-time data. Now, why do I talk about all of the data that is feeding these models and fine-tuning and RAG? Because many of the use cases that I hear customers talking about today are all about how they're going to use AI machine learning. And it all comes back to the data pipelines that they are setting up and how they are bringing all of that data to large language models. Not necessarily for the training, but certainly for fine-tuning and retrieval augmented generation. And so my first customer example here is Tyson Foods. So today, Tyson Foods, a traditional CPG company, is using large language models, but they're training those models with data from their factories. So essentially, they've got vision models, they're using real-time IoT sensor data, they're using images, video, also getting into video to train models to understand how they can run a smart factory. How can I understand maintenance events? How can I understand the operations of my factory? And for many CPG companies, they talk about this idea of a lights out factory. It can all be autonomous. But what that requires today to use those machine learning and AI models to enable that for Tyson are these data pipelines. And I love this story because essentially there's two individuals trying to manage all of the overhead of managing all of these pipelines. And actually they are using Beam technology. They've built a data ingestion compute engine internally at Tyson that enables them to, yes, bring in all of the batch data that they've been doing traditionally, but now also combine that with streaming data from their factory floors. So that is the sensor data. It's new types of data that help them manage and monitor and operate their factories. So that's 110 connected sources, 17,000 data pipeline jobs per day, with 3.25 terabytes of data being ingested every single day. This is what transformation looks like. I spoke about transformation at the beginning. This is an organization now truly able to connect batch real-time streams of data with now new vision, large language AI models that they didn't have access to before. The next trend I want to talk about is the trend around multimodal. So I spoke about in my opening that actually we find organizations only use 10% of their data. It's the 10% that is very structured or mostly structured. And so traditionally in the data analytics world, even though we said, oh, we're trying to collect all of the data and we set up even data lakes and tried to collect all of it and analyze it, the reality still is for many organizations, that the majority of a company's data, actually 80 to 90% predicted by various different analysts and external agencies, 80 to 90% is unstructured, not managed. PDFs, images, documents, sensors, data that is being generated by organizations every day, but hasn't been seen as the type of data that traditionally data analytics teams worked with. But in this era of GenAI, we're truly opening up that data now to a new type of analytic technique we didn't have before in our toolbox. We have these large language models. They can actually churn through text and video and image at lightning speed to create new insights. And so suddenly this data that remained what we call dark data, this dark data can now actually be used for insights at companies. And so we've seen a 600% growth in multimodal types of data just over the last year. That's just showing you organizations are like moving and pivoting to this multimodal image, text, video, other types of data that they weren't managing necessarily before. And an example of that is Spotify. So Spotify, we work with Spotify, they're a Google customer, and they are using multimodal data to serve their customers. So if you go to the Spotify home screen, they have these essentially cards that give you snippets of different episodes, songs, etc., on your home screen. But all of those snippets have to be created. The descriptions have to be created. As they serve you ads, they have to figure out which ads to serve. So that one home screen is actually a ton of data and analytics and modeling that is happening to bring that all together. And so actually, again, Spotify is a Beam user. So essentially today, they are combining that world of lots of different data that they're collecting. I believe they've got 14 million plus episodes, all in different languages that they need to serve up to customers. And they're using now audio analytics to first transcribe audio, do audio transcripts, also audio classification, but also then doing sophisticated analysis to find what's the right snippets to serve up to customers. Also doing analysis on the ad, essentially their ad engine. What kind of ads are we serving? So a ton of data and analytics coming together, and it has to perform at speed. Because I think on the previous slide, yes, it mentioned 8,000 previews they're generating 8,000 previews every hour. That's a huge volume of analytics that is happening. And the key here is it's not just one model. And we're seeing this now across organizations. It used to be you spoke about a fraud model, a customer experience model. Now we're seeing organizations actually combine a whole range of different models, a whole range of different analytics. Oftentimes the GenAI piece is only 10 or 20%. It's a small piece. A lot of the modeling is also traditional machine learning. But all of those models come together to create this stellar, amazing new customer experience. So again, the ability to operate at scale, the ability to do multiple types of analytics execution and bringing that all together to serve their customers. The next kind I want to talk about as we think about GenAI and the impact and how it's evolving is this concept of agentic AI. So we've all seen large language models, you've chatted with a large language model, but actually, I believe that chat was only the first innings of large language models. Chat is the first way, essentially, GenAI became popular with everybody, with all consumers, because everybody could understand. I can ask a question and I get an answer. So it's very human-centric. We can understand, oh, I'm asking questions, the large language model is creating answers, and then I'm asking another one, and it's a conversation. And conversations are great. In fact, we're doing a lot of conversational analytics now, where you're putting GenAI interfaces on top of business data, so you can chat with your business data. We're having conversations all over the place with LLMs to do lots of use cases. However, conversation is great, but it's somewhat limited because with conversation, it requires a human to be in the driver's seat, a human to be operating the large language model, to be asking the question, oh, asked a question, got an insight, now I ask another question, got another insight, and it's still a very human-intensive task. But as we've been hearing about GenAI, lots of people have been talking about how GenAI is going to open up the doors of efficiency and automation for organizations. So that conversational experience does, because it helps accelerate that human. We call it productivity boosting the human, because suddenly that human can have conversations and get information really quickly and reason with this LLM. But the next phase, we believe, beyond what we're seeing today as assistive GenAI, is actually agentic GenAI, where it's not human-driven GenAI, it's actually flipped around. It's GenAI driving and humans assisting the GenAI. So how do we get to agentic? The idea that actually agents, GenAI agents, are able to be chained together and able to execute workflows in my organization with some assistance from a human. Well, that is exactly some of the research our DeepMind teams are working on. Some of our teams in our data analytics teams looking at how does agentic AI come to fruition. And there's a few different dimensions to this. You've all chatted with large language models, so you've all probably come up against a hallucination or an answer that just doesn't seem quite as right. And you're like, I need to change the prompt, ask it in a different way, tell the large language model it's wrong. Because GenAI reasons. It reasons and creates, which is a capability that traditional analytics didn't have. A traditional analytics model would give you a black and white answer, yes or no, probability. Whereas GenAI is this creative engine. It's able to reason and create responses. The problem in the business world is when you start to generate and create responses, it's not so great if I'm asking what was my revenue. And it's like, well, I think it's going to be $1 million. I'm expecting real answers. Now start applying GenAI then to a business process. If I want to use GenAI to automate a business process, I can't let it be too creative where it starts to create things that just don't make sense anymore, that it hallucinates. And so actually, as we move beyond this conversational world to this agentic AI, what our teams are working on is actually evolving large language models so they have more capabilities to be able to understand when they're wrong, to be able to not just reason and create something, but actually every time it's reasoning, it's doing an uncertainty estimation, which is how our brains work. Like when if I make a hypothesis, if I say, hey, I think the microphone is black, my brain is doing a reasoning and saying, okay, I'm very confident about that. And I'll adjust my language based on that. I'll say, I think versus I believe, or I know. So our brains are able to do this uncertainty estimation really fast on the fly. We don't even realize it. And we're able to make reasons and assumptions, but with a certain estimation. I think this is true. I know this is true. Those are the same capabilities that we're now looking at. How do we get large language models to understand that? So a large language model understanding that every time it comes up with an inference, it needs to have this uncertainty estimation. And in fact, we're seeing GenAI models evolve really fast at being able to do that, to be able to mimic human minds, to be able to actually create causal models of the world. If this is true, then this. If this is true, then this. It's teaching the large language model more about the world versus just facts and data like traditional analytics. And so as we look at agentic AI, the large language models are going to evolve really quickly to encapsulate many of those capabilities. And as we, in parallel, look at data analytics, what we're looking at is how can you then start to use these agents to do things like build a data pipeline, to do a data engineering task? Can we have an agent that actually mimics a data engineer and is able to clean data, is able to assess data, is able to do quality control over data, is able to do governance, identify when there's PII information in the data? So as we build our data analytics technology also at Google, we're building a lot of autonomous capability, agent capability, so that things like governance, identifying PII information, identifying issues or errors in the data, biases, that can also actually all be baked in to the data platforms. And we're working with some of our customers who are essentially looking at building those automated workflows. One of those customers is Palo Alto Networks. Palo Alto are doing real-time identification of threats. They do a ton of log analytics. And again, they use Beam technology to do this. They're running over 10,000 streaming pipelines in production. And essentially, as that streaming pipeline comes in, they're doing various detection, anomaly detection. They're detecting for any kind of threat, what they've coded as essentially threat activities, incidents. And so, Palo Alto Networks is one of kind of my standout customers, because I just love how they're really taking this world of, traditionally it was all machine learning, by the way, now leveraging more of the AI large language models to build automated pipelines. And I think we're going to see more of this as we see LLMs mature. Okay, my final observation in the era of GenAI is all around decision making. So traditionally, we've spoken about data and analytics going from data to insights to action. But in reality, we don't actually really get to action. We get to data, and we're lucky if the system is actually giving insights, and we're very far from what people describe as prescriptive analytics, like true action. But actually, organizations manage to take actions. It's just very siloed today. So we'll build solutions within the marketing department, within the supply chain department, to look at data, generate insights, take action, look at data, generate insights, take action. And we've gotten very good at that. However, it's been very hard for us to scale. So even though individual business functions have got very good at taking actions, typically in large organizations, you see disconnects. The supply chain team is not connected with the consumer insights team. So even though the supply chain team is working on a well-oiled machine, still the right products are not getting to the right place to serve the right customers. The finance team is disconnected from the logistics team. So the cost costs in our business are ballooning around package deliveries. So even though we've been able to micro optimize parts of our business, actually looking at an entire business and being able to orchestrate that business has been really hard. And this is where Gen AI comes in, because many of you, think about the first time you built a batch pipeline or a real-time pipeline. It's probably a while ago. It's not new technology. Building pipelines is not new. We've been doing it for decades. But what's new today is with the embedding, the ability to actually do machine learning and AI inside of a real-time pipeline or inside of a batch pipeline changes the game. Because now suddenly you have a technology that means you're not divorcing the worlds of data, engineering, and analytics. You're actually bringing them together into an ecosystem where you can be doing insight detection on the fly as real-time data is coming in. And with Gen AI, it's actually able to adapt based on the real-time streams of data and identify trends that are happening over time. Also, through signals that are coming in, it's able to continuously learn and adjust its behavior. And it's also able to do this over multimodal data sets, like we spoke about before. And so I think one of the key trends that we see happening is more of this convergence. Previously we always spoke about an end-to-end data analytics pipeline like it was a linear thing. Well, today we're seeing it's no longer a linear thing. We're actually seeing data, AI, machine learning, insights, action, all coming together into this one system. And that is where you can then have this orchestration across the enterprise. So more use cases, unlocking more use cases where it's product teams with customer experience teams, it's logistics and finance, it's your revenue teams with your risk teams able to actually unlock more of the data at the same time across the enterprise. So the stakes are high, but the potential much higher. What do I mean by that? The technology pieces are all there today. I mentioned at the beginning that true transformation innovation happens when many different technology innovations happen to come together, right maturity, right level at the same time. And that's what we're seeing in today's landscape. We're seeing data, AI, machine learning, real time, all of these pieces, the cloud technology, all of them coming together at a point that enables organizations to truly transform. And I like this quote from Marco from Goldman Sachs saying, this change in data from batch to real time means the organization has to move on a heartbeat. Literally, we're changing the way organizations think, decide, act. It's no longer about data analytics happening in this end-to-end stream. It's about this continuous system that is being orchestrated. And we're very excited about all of the innovation that we are doing in this space as we at Google support this community, but also bring together much of that Gen AI innovation that is happening at Google, bringing AI machine learning to real-time streams, bringing together batch in real time, bringing together multimodal data sets now, whether they're in Iceberg, Delta, Hudi, open formats, wherever that data might live. What's exciting to me is what we're doing to bring that all together for our customers. And here is just a sample of some of the customers doing. I mentioned some of these use cases during the presentation today, but a huge variety of use cases, too many to fit on the slide. The use cases are really everywhere. And it's, often we get asked, like, what's the top 2 or 3 use cases? The use cases are truly everywhere, from marketing, finance, supply chain, many different departments, and also things like log analytics, real-time ETL, actually the data analytics part of the world as well. So the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed because not every organization is moving at the same pace. I used some examples today of organizations we're working with who are truly accelerating with this technology. But equally, we see a lot of new startups, unicorns, that are leveraging this technology to disrupt traditional industries. Just like I spoke about the iPhone disrupted the traditional mobile phone market, we're seeing that level of disruption as new entrants come in and bring some of these technologies together. So really appreciate your time today. Thank you.